The first time Veda saw the spectral bus glide through the ragged pre-dawn fog, she assumed exhaustion had finally put a crack in her vision of the world. She had been awake for nearly 2 days finishing the visuals for a pharmaceutical campaign she despised, and the caffeine that kept her upright now pulsed in her ears. Yet the bus, its silver chassis more like a mirage than metal, idled at the curb outside her apartment building with mechanical patience. A single digit glowed on the destination screen, 3:33. The clock on her phone matched it precisely, though she had no memory of setting an alarm. A tingle of déjà vu rippled through her. There, in the warm light leaking from the street lamps onto the pavement, was the impossible chance to board something that shouldn't exist. She watched in fascination as the doors sighed open. The driver, a wiry older woman with chrome-white eyebrows, looked down at a ledger balanced on her knee. Looking up, she nodded at Veda, as though they had an appointment. Veda felt herself step forward. The doors shut behind her with a whisper, like a page turning. Inside, the bus smelled faintly of cedar and fresh rainfall. A mix of passengers dotted the seats, an exhausted nurse clasping a stethoscope, a teenager in a tuxedo still holding a corsage, a middle-aged man reading dog-eared travel guides in 3 languages at once. All of them bore the same private glow, eyes shining as if they were secretly remembering something beautiful. None spoke. The interior lights were dim and tinted violet, making every reflection on the windows look like a ghost. The driver pulled the lever and the bus eased away. Pale houses slid by outside like painted scenery. Veda clung to a pole near the back, gauging her decision, heart drumming. The bus number above the windshield read 333. No route name, no central logo. Only the tiniest line of elegant script along the ceiling's edge. Somniac Transit Authority. A tiny bell chimed. The teenager in the tuxedo stood first, nodded gratefully toward no one in particular, and stepped off into a quiet suburban cul-de-sac. As the doors closed, Veda glimpsed 3 versions of the same boy waiting on the sidewalk. One holding a violin case, one embracing a second tuxedoed boy with laughter, and one holding nothing at all, staring up at the receding bus as if he'd missed his chance. Then the bus whisked forward again, and the street dissolved in the gloom behind them. A shiver crawled up Veda's arms. The nurse in the next row noticed and lifted her chin in gentle explanation. Her lips barely moved. "It ferries dreamers," she whispered, "into lives they might have lived." Then she returned her gaze to the window, where city blocks folded themselves into vast farmland lit by unreal moonlight. Veda swallowed. "Am I dreaming?" The woman's smile was compassionate. "Yes and no. Best to get off when the stop feels right, though. Missing the bell, well, that's a tangle you don't want." Before Veda could probe further, the nurse rose. The bell had sounded again. She exited onto the shoulder of a country road that glittered with frost. Standing there waiting for her were 2 identical nurses of slightly different ages, and another version in civilian clothes cradling a newborn. The door hissed shut, and the bus snapped back into motion. Veda's skin prickled as if she'd been jolted by static. She understood, with a surprising certitude, that the passengers were arriving at worlds where diverging choices had grown entire alternate lives, timelines as real as the one she'd woken in. The bus line at 3:33 a.m. was the interlacing nerve of all those timelines. Somewhere within her, intuitive wonder overcame rational dread, and she walked down the aisle toward the driver. "Where do I get off?" she asked, half pleading. "Our job isn't direction," the driver replied without glancing away from the dark road ahead. "Routes are braided to desire. You'll know." "How will I know?" The driver flicked the signal lights for an invisible turn. "By the ache easing in your chest." Veda returned to a seat, hands clasped. Her chest ached indeed, a chronic bruise she'd ignored for years, born from unvoiced urges. To travel, to paint murals instead of corporate slogans, to confront her estranged mother. Somewhere, a version of her had done those things. The bus might deliver her there. Still, fear stirred. If she waited too long, would she miss her stop? What nightmare tangle did the nurse warn about? A few minutes or hours. Time was elastic, passed. More passengers stood as the bell chimed. The travel guide man stepped into a bustling Turkish bazaar. A woman carrying a half-finished manuscript disembarked into a glowing library whose shelves ascended into clouds. Each time, multiple variants waited to greet the arriving passenger. Each time, the bus gained momentum, reality outside flickering between city and jungle, ocean and desert, highways and galaxies. None of it obeyed sequence. Only 4 riders remained when the bus eventually rattled to a halt at an altitude so high the windows steamed. Snow whipped across the glass. Veda and the remaining 2, a businessman whose tie kept changing colors and an elderly lady stroking a knitting bag, sat silently. The bell did not ring. The driver waited, expectant. "Someone stop!" she called over her shoulder. The businessman glanced around, confused. His phone screen glowed azure, then scarlet, cycling through wallpaper images of a family, smiling, scowling, missing. He stayed seated. The elderly knitter, squinting, joined him in uncertainty. The driver sighed, eased the bus back into motion, and muttered something Veda barely caught. "Missed." A low humming filled the bus, as though the floorboards had begun to argue. The lights dimmed further, tint shifting from violet to bruise black. Outside, mountains stretched and twisted, forming impossible arches. The 3 passengers exchanged alarmed glances. "What happens if you miss?" the businessman asked, voice trembling. The driver's answer was blunt. "Worlds converge until they can't tell you apart. Your lives fold over. You experience all of them simultaneously, forever, like living in a kaleidoscope of fire." Veda felt her pulse stutter. She shot from her seat. "Can't you turn back?" "This route goes forward only," the driver replied. "We offer one more chance. When the bell rings next, anyone left must step off. No reassurance that it'll be pleasant, but it'll be singular at least." A metallic groan echoed through the bus. The overhead lights fizzed. The aisle stretched, doubling in length. Seats multiplied like reflections. Snow outside turned to swirling ink. On Veda's wrist, her watch hand spun counterclockwise. The elderly knitter began to weep, clutching her bag. Yarn slithered out, unraveling into thin streams that wound around her ankles, then sagged into the aisle as vibrant lines of fate. Colors changed, vermilion, turquoise, bone white, threads overlapping like branching possibilities. Veda stared, mesmerized, until her vision blurred and she saw figures moving inside each thread. The knitter teaching a child to weave, the knitter lying in a hospital bed alone, the knitter dancing flamenco in a red dress. All possibilities screamed for recognition. "We have to choose," Veda urged. The businessman stood, clutching the stanchion. His tie colors flickered faster. "I don't know which is mine anymore." The bell rang, a pure tone, silver and terrifying. Doors opened onto a threshold of nothing, an expanse so blank that even light avoided it. Yet in the blankness swam faint silhouettes. Veda focused. A cottage with murals across the walls, her mother holding a mug of tea. A young Veda painting sunrise on a train car. The ache in her chest melted. She felt air rush out of her as though life itself was exhaling. She stepped forward. The businessman and the knitter hesitated, enthralled by their own visions. Office towers glittering gold. A beachside house brimming with grandkids. But their hesitation gave birth to new, conflicting figures behind those first images. Riot police dragging the businessman from a protest, the knitter standing at a grave. With each contradictory vision, the doorway flickered, unstable. Veda reached back. "Come on!" The businessman lunged. The knitter followed. The 3 spilled out onto a street, a field, a memory. They landed on dusty ground beneath a violet dawn, the air fragrant with jasmine and something electric. Behind them, the doors hissed shut, but the bus did not depart. Instead, it dissolved, each bolt unspooling into motes of light that rose and vanished. An empty stretch of road remained. The place was a borderland, Veda realized, an unclaimed territory between timelines. A sleepy village sprawled ahead, identical cottages differing only by the color of the smoke curling from chimneys. Some smoke drifted upward, some fell like ribbons to the earth, some coiled sideways into rivers. The knitter studied her unraveling yarn, which now floated, forming glowing lines into different cottages. She looked at Veda with damp, marveling eyes. Which one am I? Veda searched for the pull in her chest, but the ache was gone entirely, and with it, certainty. She recalled what the driver warned. One chance. Had she exited too soon? Too late? Her eyes flicked to the businessman, whose tie had stilled on a soft cerulean. He stared at the cottages, breath visible in the cool dawning air. A thunderous horn blasted behind them. The three whirled. Another bus, same silver, same number, materialized on the road like a photograph developing. Its destination screen, however, flashed not 333, but the doors clanked open. Inside, the lights were not violet, but an unsettling blood amber. No driver sat behind the wheel. The passengers of that bus were monsters stitched of overlapping selves, 1,000 faces forming one, limbs interchanging as though shuffling decks, tears and laughter simultaneously issuing from mouths that reconfigured each second. They writhed in their seats, trapped within their own fracturing possibilities, the nightmare the driver had described. A cold wind blew from the open doorway, smelling of entropy. "Don't look," Veda whispered, but it was too late. The businessman's eyes widened. He saw himself among the distorted forms, corporate tyrant, street poet, murderer, monk, each screaming inside the other. Hearing his own panicked breath, he took a step toward the bus, not out of desire, but recognition, that he already belonged to that merging. "No!" Veda grabbed his wrist, nails digging into flesh. The tie flashed crimson. He wrenched free. In that motion, Veda glimpsed him blurred by fluctuations. A father calling out for his children, a drunk smashing a window, an athlete crossing a finish line, a frozen corpse on a bench. His silhouette stuttered like faulty film. The knitter's yarn coiled around his ankle, trying to anchor him, but the thread snapped, turning to smoke. He climbed aboard. The doors slammed with a metallic finality. The amber lights went dark, and in an instant, the bus vanished. Only the pale groove of its tires remained, slowly filling with drifting petals of unseen flowers. Silence descended. A mourning dove called from nowhere. The knitter collapsed onto a stone, tears caught in the wrinkles of her cheeks. Veda stood shaking, adrenaline sizzling in her blood. She could almost feel the weight of all the businessman's lost possibilities settling over the land like thick fog. "We're still here," Veda whispered. "We're still singular." "But where?" the knitter croaked. Veda surveyed the cottages again. In one direction, she recognized a mural of a phoenix, a design she had sketched during art school but never painted. Another cottage bore a wrought iron gate identical to the house her estranged mother had recently moved into. A third cottage, covered in climbing roses, emitted music reminiscent of her childhood piano recitals. All these places were invitations, but none felt exactly hers. The ache had vanished. Now she felt only hollow confusion. "I don't think we're meant to choose among them," Veda realized. "We already did, on the bus. We chose uncertainty." The knitter squeezed her bag. "So we wander?" "Maybe we weave," Veda suggested, surprised by her own metaphor. She knelt, gathering the remnants of yarn that still glowed faintly. The threads responded, twining into her palm like eager serpents. She handed some to the knitter. Together, they began knotting the yarn into a makeshift cord, a tether between them. The colors mingled, vermilion with slate, turquoise with gold. When they lifted the cord, it pulsed, alive. A direction tugged at them, not toward any cottage, but toward the horizon where the sky shimmered with half-formed constellations. A road materialized beneath their feet, cobbled from shards of different terrains: sand, asphalt, marble, grass. The landscape responded to the braided yarn, generating a path newly stitched from the threads of their combined probabilities. "Maybe we build our world," Veda said softly. They walked. The village receded without protest. As the path lengthened, memory and possibility interwove around them. A grove of trees sprouted leaves shaped like paintbrushes. A stream carved itself into clefts and notes that rang with liquid music. The sky unveiled a sunrise painted in the saturated palette Veda had always reserved for imaginary canvases. Each step birthed reality tailored to their intertwined stories. This is beautiful, the knitter breathed, voice steadier. Are we safe? I don't think safe is the point, Veda answered. But we're authors now. If we keep weaving, the world won't split us apart. They paused on a hill crest where the path forked. One direction led toward a bustling coastal town. The other plunged into a crystalline forest glowing teal. Between those forks hovered a signpost with one blank plank, and one plank etched with a simple inscription. 333 is, whenever you surrender, doubt. Veda touched the blank plank, and words bled onto it in wet ink. Veda and Adela's root. The knitter, Adela, laughed, wiping her eyes. Adela knotted more yarn, doubling their tether. Choose, she invited. Let's explore both, Veda replied. She threw the cord high. It split, forming two identical tethers glowing differently. The path likewise branched, granting them their twin ways forward. As they parted, still within sight of each other, Veda felt a new ache appear. But it was warm, the ache of anticipation. She stepped into the crystalline forest, the path crunching like frost candy. Brush-shaped leaves dipped to greet her, coating her boots in pigments that shifted color with her mood. She sang a note, and the trees harmonized. She spoke her mother's name, and a breeze carried back a forgiving echo. She paused, sensing footsteps behind. Turning, she saw a man with a cerulean tie stepping out from behind a tree. Whole, singular, eyes bright. The businessman had managed to leap off the nightmare bus, perhaps at some unseen curve, and landed inside her newborn world. He looked bewildered but alive. They regarded each other, two survivors of converging infinities. Veda smiled and extended a length of spare yarn. "Help me paint?" she asked. He accepted, relief softening his face. Together they wove the yarn between trees, forming a glowing loom. Colors streamed from their fingertips. Music hummed in the leaves. With every pass of the thread, images appeared, strangers gathering, building cottages that spun slowly like carousels, children learning in luminous classrooms, rivers ferrying hope to farther realms. Night fell and dawn rose in rapid cycles. Time answered to their creative pulse now. They rested only when the sky turned a glowing periwinkle, and in the hush came the distant hiss of a bus door. Veda stood, yarn coiling at her ankles, and peered through the forest. There, far off on a hill, the silver bus idled, its destination screen blank. The driver, the chrome-eyebrowed woman, leaned from her seat, regarding Veda with a half-smile. This time, Veda did not feel summoned. She understood. The bus would forever wander, carrying dreamers to crossroads, carrying the lost into themselves. Her journey from passenger to pathmaker had already begun. She inclined her head in gratitude. The driver raised 2 fingers in a curt salute and pulled the lever. The bus drifted away like moonlight, becoming a thin wisp that joined the dawn. Veda's chest filled with a calm certainty. She was awake in a place no less real for being made of dreams. She picked up the yarn again, cinching new patterns into existence. Adela's laughter echoed across some unseen cleft, mingling with distant bells. The forest shimmered, waiting for color. When the next 3:33 came, and it would somewhere, another dreamer might step onto the bus, might miss their stop, might choose uncertainty and land upon this woven land. Veda wanted the realm ready for them, hospitable and bright. So she worked, spinning threads, painting air, rewriting the ache that once wounded her into a beacon for wanderers. And somewhere across infinite timelines, countless buses churned through mist, clanging little silver bells, inviting restless hearts to listen for the easing of their own ache and step off before the nightmare merger seized them. Some would succeed, some would not. But here, in a forest where every leaf was a brushstroke and every breath a note, Veda quietly vowed that whoever arrived lost and trembling would find a hand extended from the dawn, offering yarn, offering choice. After all, paths braid to desire, she thought, repeating the driver's words. And desire, when honored, doesn't end the dream. It authors it. She lifted her arm, flinging a ribbon of color through the sky, illuminating the horizon in shades unseen, and the world unfolded, waiting to be woven.